Welcome to Sax Radio, broadcasting live from the heart of Tsepisha, Phase 1, local in South Africa. Tune in for the ultimate musical journey and the latest updates from our vibrant nation. Sax Radio, where the rhythm of South Africa comes to life.
From the Reggae Economy Forum show, we're having one of our best guests, the messenger, someone who will teach us more about the Rastafarian religion, the education. And let's welcome him, Dr. Vavian Crawford. Greetings, Doctor.
Greetings. Thank you very much. Mr. Franco Sacconi, High Commissioner, yes. Joan Thomas Edwards, Jamaica's High Commissioner to South Africa, and Rastaman Nkushu, and listeners to the station.
We really appreciate your time and everything. As we know, we're having an issue of education all over the world, even Jamaica and South Africa. It's the same thing. Like Malcolm X says, education is the passport for the future. Even Marcus Garvey say the people must know their past, like a tree without the roots. For our answers or our the question lead to the how does the Jamaican education has deep roots. So can you give us a brief overview of Jamaican education system? Why it is?
Thank you very, very much for your kind invitation for me to share our Jamaican story. And I bring greetings from the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. I want to thank you for the teaching about education, especially about African history in our Jamaican schools. And let me begin with an African proverb. Truth is like oil. No matter how much water you pour on it, it will always float.
Yes.
It's an African proverb. I want to share a story about one of Jamaica's outstanding leaders, the late Sir Philip Sherlock, 1902 to 2000. He was late Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. Sir Philip said when he was a student at Calabar High School here in Jamaica, and that school is named after Calabar in southeastern Nigeria. The third city originally named Akapa in the Etic language. Sir Philip had requested of his principal at the school, an Englishman, that the students be taught some Caribbean history, including the African connection. And the principal replied, "Boy, you have no history." Sir Philip spent the remainder of his life providing that the principal was wrong. The teaching of African history in Jamaican schools began just a generation ago. In my time at school, we were never taught African connection. The only thing we were taught is that our enslaved came from Africa. African geography we were taught, yes. Hence I always ask you about Table Mountain. But African history is only, as I said, that our ancestors were brought here in chains and subjected to work in the most horrendous condition. The directors of our education policy at the time would be unmindful of the words of the Right Excellent Marcus Messiah Garvey, who said, quote, "History is the landmark by which we are directed into the true course of life. The history of a movement, the history of a race is the guidepost of that movement. It is the guidepost of that movement's destiny, that nation's destiny, that race's destiny. What you do today that is worthwhile inspires others to act at some future time," end quote. And we're all indebted to West Indian authors for telling our story. And these include the history, the connection with Africa in our educational system. F.R. Auger, Professor Auger, died recently, and S. Shirley Gordon, Sources of West Indian History. Professor Ulcer Gavaya. Professor Ulcer Gavaya and Professor Auger taught me. Professor Auger was from Grenada. Professor Gavaya was from Ghana, a Guyanese scholar. She wrote a study on the historiography of the British West Indies. Then we have Sarah James, the Black Jacobins. Eric Williams, late Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, for his stunning book, Capitalism and Slavery. He went to Oxford University, and when he wrote this for his citation, Capitalism and Slavery, they asked him how he knew so much about the subject, and I understand his reply was, those who feel it know it. We have two agencies of government here in Jamaica, and they focus on our African connection. They are the African Caribbean Institute of Jamaica, Jamaica Memory Bank, and that focuses on African retention. And we have Liberty Hall, the legacy of Marcus Garvey, where African history has side of place. So that, in a nutshell, is our educational policy with regard to African connection.
In other words, South African education, there is a gap between Jamaican education and South Africa. And what I want to know, I want to check, how can the African learn from Jamaican approach to the history of culture and empowerment, especially in education of African countries?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question and that inclusion. The link between Africa and Jamaica is a strong one. 90.5% of our people here in Jamaica are Negro Black, and 7.3% regarded as mixed race. How did we get here? I remind you that in 1513, Africans were captured from the Bight of Biafra by Spaniards and brought to other countries of our ancestors. And some of the countries from which they were taken include Ghana, Nigeria, Central Africa, Yoruba, Ashanti people. The link is therefore necessary because of the enduring African retentions in Jamaica. Among the many uses of Africa, the issues of African heritage is the contribution of our enslaved Africans to the industrial. I spoke about that last time. The contribution of enslaved Africans to the Industrial Revolution of England, and that is recorded in the Guardian newspaper of the 5th of July, 2023. It is a must read, where it states 76 enslaved Africans here in Jamaica at a property named in St. Thomas, Roselle. They used scrap iron to be made into wrought iron. And evidence of that in England today, Kew Gardens, Crystal Palace, St. Pancras train station. They benefited because the enslaved, you see, listeners, had no copyright legitimacy. Henry Court, an Englishman, acquired the copyright, the machinery, and patented the technique in 1780s. The story of the Egyptian civilization is impatient of debate and complements the history of geography we were taught. We were taught the geography, but never the history. But remember what I said at the beginning of the program. You cannot pour water and oil. Oil like truth will float. Well, I like what the Europeans, the colonizers, they started with the geography. Because beside the geography, there comes the history. We regard Africa as a safe space. It is a source of knowledge. And we who are descendants of enslaved people, it is dear, 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 very dear to us. So as I said, all our history, we have to start with the geography. And the geography will propel us into what history we should know. And this is what we have been doing.
So what is the significance of African flora to Jamaica?
Oh, the flora. I'm so glad. The plants of Africa to Jamaica. Because, when the Spaniards came, there was an indigenous group here called the Tainos. The Tainos would have come from South America and, traveling by boat, they come up on a country and they like it and there is abundance. When Christopher Columbus came, he said that this is the fairest isles that eyes have ever seen. So, through enslavement, many plants came to Jamaica from our dear Africa. And although not originated in Africa, some of these plants are mango. Mango came from Africa, but it was originally, as you know, from India. And through trade, it would have traveled, it would have been taken to Africa. And it was introduced to Africa, mango, by the Arabs and the Persians. And other plants, bamboo. We have bamboo. I know it came from the Far East, but it came from Africa to us here. And that was useful for wattle, what we call wattle, that was used on the huts in which our enslaved were placed to sleep. All they could do in it was to sleep. They could not stay in it as a home. It was a hut, a shed, like in which, because when you do Blood Legacy by Alex Renton, and you learn that there were some Europeans who saw our ancestors as half animal and half human. And that was used as a justification to use them on the plantation because they could withstand the heat. But they were treated like animals. And that's a part of the hidden history that is never taught. And so the plants, the bamboo, I am old enough to know that in my own village, that the bamboo was used as a what you would use board to do on the house. The bamboo was used to do it. And edible greens, vegetables like okra and callaloo. Then there were tubers like yam and dasheen. And there's a tuber called cocoa, not the cocoa that you call, some call it chocolate. And it's used to make those lovely chocolates that you eat. No, this is a tuber called cocoa. Then we have tambourine. Now tambourine, although it would have come from the Far East, it was used on the ships on which the enslaved were. You know tambourine? You have tambourine in South Africa?
No, we don't have.
You don't, wonder if it is too cold. Now tambourine, Tamrind, tambourine. And it was used on the enslaved, on the ships for the enslaved. It was using to purify the drinking water on the ships.
Oh, okay. Now I know it.
The tambourine, it was used to purify the water on the ship. Then we have tuber, well, of course, yam and plantains. That was used on the ship as food supplies for the enslaved. One of the things they tried to do on the ships is to feed the enslaved as much as they could. Because when they arrived in Jamaica, they were bathed oiled. They were oiled. Then they put them on an auction block where people bid for them. And after they were sold, they branded them like animals with hot iron. It is very painful and emotional to know that humans could do this to another human for the sake of money and enrichment. And that is why I am not surprised that this history was never taught in Europe because of economic reasons. And so we also have the coconut, cola nut, Kola nut, and we call that busy. And you have that in South Africa, cola nut. You know that it's cola nut, and it's used for medicinal properties, especially against poisoning. When I was a child, and you went anywhere and you felt your stomach upset, you would chew a piece of the busy. The tree is very, very beautiful. And so we had busy nuts, and I'm told that is what the drink you have, cola, Coca-Cola.
Yes.
That's what it is made from. And the enslaved, our enslaved were allowed plots on which to cultivate, and they were called Negro ground. And in all my childhood, I always say why they call it ground. But in the Jamaican language, we never said ground, Ground. We said Grung. We are going to ground. And some people say we are going to the field. But I now know that our ancestors would not say ground because it takes a lot of effort to pronounce that D at the end. So they left off the D and said we are going to ground. We must mention the African tulip tree. I don't know if you know that tree. It's called Spathodia. It is called in some countries flame of the forest. Bright, beautiful red flowers. But guess what? It is invasive. It can just take over your population and it just becomes a problem. But it is so beautiful. And then, of course, our Aki. You don't know Aki, do you?
No, I don't know.
Well, that came from Ghana. Believe it or not, it is a fruit, and it cannot be eaten as a fruit raw. But when it is cooked, you take out there's a pink thing in it, and you take it out, and you cook it. Oh my heavens. You see, it takes on the taste, the flavor of what it is cooked with. So in Jamaica, that's used for breakfast. And it looks like scrambled eggs.
Oh,
it's yellow and it looks like scrambled eggs. And we cook it with codfish. Now remember that codfish came from Canada, Newfoundland. That was used to feed our enslaved. And the after effects of that, of course, is hypertension in the DNA. But codfish and the ackee and the coconut juice, that was part of the cooking. Well, ackee and saltfish is a part of our national dish. Then we have anato. You know anato?
Yeah, I know anato.
We have anato and we have cashew, which came from Africa. So the African flora, the African trees form a part here. Then we have a tree called the boa. You know that tree? It is.
No, I know it.
Yes. Well, it is here, but in Jamaica, it is mistaken for another tree called the guango tree. And you know that the boa tree can store large quantities of water in their trunks, and it is among the oldest trees. In fact, according to the Guinness Book of Records, It is the largest tree. And as you know, the fruits are used as food. So that is about our flora, our plants, and how Africa, Mother, Father Africa, helped us here with it.
Yeah, no, we are learning, even though it's difficult, but we are learning it. As long as our listeners are listening and they enjoy the answers and everything. They say that music can divide you, but they say music can unite us together as one, like one love, people get ready, but speeches divide us. What message can Africa and Jamaican show to the world?
Oh, wow. Yes. And I repeat what you said. Where music is unites, speech can divide, but music can unite. Wow.
Yes.
All my childhood, I grew up with the notion about most of the music I was exposed to, the African rhythm. It's the African rhythm. Even if we have the European melody, we use the African rhythm because it's the African rhythm is going to create the music. And the contribution of Africa's music to the world is impatient of debate because the enslaved who went to the Western world, especially America, the West Indies, you are accustomed to genres of blues, rock, steady, and jazz. And these were influenced by our African traditions. You are aware that during enslavement, the enslaved had no freedom of expression. But the only thing, as I said last time, they were allowed to sing because the masters knew that by singing, they worked faster. They forgot their troubles, especially when they told them about a land far away flowing with milk and honey. And if they work hard, they would reach there. Oh my God.
Yes.
Yes. So the transatlantic trade brought music. It's diversity of music. We had a diversity of music because Africa is a vast continent, and it explains, and each part of Africa has its music, and you can imagine when all of this diversity, when we meet together, the various rhythms